Hello, Future Tribe. We've got a doozy of an episode this week. No logos or branding changes when it comes to the design aspect, but there is some branding changes from a company name perspective. Uh, Rolling into it, we've got Vistaprint buying Crello, which is a Canva competitor that we're actually a huge fan of and use and have been using for a couple of years. Vistaprint also bought DepositPhotos. Facebook changes to Meta, which is their new name. A lot more on that. Instagram lets everyone share story links now. So that's the link sticker in your Instagram stories. Dollarmites is finished. Very relevant if you're an Aussie kid. Um, and LinkedIn launching a freelance platform to compete with Fiverr and Upwork.
Yeah, we'll also be discussing Google might not be the default Android search for much longer. AMP is bringing less revenue into publishers. TikTok is testing a tipping function. There's a few T's in there. Apple forgot they added a notch, and finishing off with a direct integration between Mailchimp and Shopify and what this means.
All right, that's Kelsey. I'm Jermaine, and let's roll the intro and get into this. All right, I am sure that everyone's heard of Vistaprint. You've heard of Vistaprint, Kelsey?
Absolutely. It's kind of I think it's the name I think of whenever I go, I need like a business card or anything printed professionally. That's probably the first name I go to.
Yeah, wow. I think Officeworks, if you're in Australia, has a lot to say about that.
Fair.
but Vistaprint's massive. I mean, so is Officeworks, but Vistaprint is a global phenomenon when it comes to printing merchandise. And they've had a Wix integration, so they've been sort of working in the web space for a little while. They own 99 Designs, which is I guess a platform for freelancers to deliver work through. Sort of relevant, I guess, talking about LinkedIn later on. But the big news today, for me at least, is that they bought Crello and DepositPhotos. So Vistaprint's gone from being this place where you order your designs on merchandise to being a place that can do everything. So Vistaprint can let you, I mean, produce it, either get it produced for you by their 99 Design service, or let you produce it using a graphical editor like Crello, which they've rebranded to Vista Create, I believe.
Yeah.
And then you can source your stock photos as well, which is really handy when we're talking about the website side of things. And then, of course, all said and done, you can produce it, or they can produce it for you and send it in the mail. So, to me, this is an interesting move that they announced both simultaneously. I think it's a big sign that they are really going strong into this space. Um, I've heard various stats, but something like 30 or a quarter to a third of individuals in the US will have a business over the coming years, and I'm sure that'll increase. And this just really puts the power to them, because no longer do you need to contact printers or contact a graphic designer. You can just get it all done through Vista Print, all the way through. What are
Yeah.
your
It's
thoughts on that?
it's really just it's become a one-stop shop. I think previously, if you were going into business, it was really the case of you had to do your research to know, if you're going to a printer, what information to give them and all of that sort of stuff. And it can be quite complicated sometimes because of all the different options and all of that. And, you'd be paying a graphic designer quite a bit in the past. And of course, if you're wanting to design your own things, that was a whole different issue because, what programs do you need? Do you need to be specially trained? All that sort of stuff. All of a sudden, you go to one spot it's nice and easy. There's a pretty logical flow. I'm sure everything would integrate, and there would be little prompts of, once you've finished a design, do you want to give this to the printers? What's going on there? So I think it's a really smart move. And it would be, I don't know, I feel like there's definitely other companies that have done this, none that spring to mind right now, but I'm sure that there have been a few that are following a similar path. But it'll be interesting to see what other companies start to do this kind of thing where they really get the full end-to-end process of one particular idea, if that makes sense.
Well, I would say, for most businesses, it's a goal certainly to do that. And Vistaprint's taken an interesting approach because they've just acquired all the other business units to make it all work, which is quite a smart move, I would say, because they don't need to try and perfect that and spend years trying to get all these different things right. They just buy companies that have got it right, and then those companies can keep growing. They get to integrate into Vistaprint, and everyone's really, really happy. And I don't think personally, I don't think it makes it or sort of threatens the existence of agencies, etc. I think what
That's
it
a different
does
market,
is
really.
exactly. If you don't want to worry about it, if you just want to leave it to the professionals, reach out to someone like Future Theory, who's us, or any other agency, and we can take care of it all for you. But if you want to design something for yourself, or if you're just happy to, just do it all yourself, especially sort of looking at that stat of people getting into small businesses or starting side hustles, this is extremely low barrier to entry. I think there's a free product off Crello, and there'll be free or very cheap offerings across the board, and then your real cost is paying to get something printed onto either business cards or whatever else it may be. But by that stage, it's also fairly affordable. So interesting move, all said and done. One thing I forgot to mention as well is, if you're wondering why there's a concrete wall behind me, if you're watching the video, I don't think you could hear a difference of where we're talking from. But I should mention that we're at FD Studio, which is our new studio space. It's been an interesting few months sort of moving into this space and then going into lockdown just as we got ready to announce it all. But we'll have links to the space, and you can see photos and see a bit more about FD Studio as well. I'm sure we'll link to it in the description. Just wanted to mention that, put it out there. Now that we're slowly coming out of, at least a state of where we need to lock down often. Eventually, once we don't have to wear masks indoors, Kelsey, I'm looking forward to us just sitting across the table, having a chat, and this podcast sort of really being a lot more personable than video
Mhm.
than video calls.
Yeah, the way it was originally supposed to be.
Exactly. You're like a wall away, like
Yeah.
two walls away. We're not that far away, but we've got to be responsible at the moment and follow the rules. Anyway, moving into something that is actually, it makes sort of the whole video calling sort of conversation interesting, in that Facebook's announced that they're changing the corporate name to Meta. That's similar to Google changing to Alphabet. I don't remember when that was. Do you, Kelsey?
I'm still not, like, you keep mentioning Alphabet, but I'm still actually not aware, besides you mentioning it, of Alphabet as a business. I just only know Google. So I can't answer
Yeah.
that one, unfortunately.
Well, I think you sort of make that point, and to be fair, most people probably won't notice that Facebook's changed the name to Meta, because
Although I've
we're
seen like
talking about the
50 articles about it today.
same thing happened when Alphabet was announced. So maybe you just weren't paying
Mm,
attention.
maybe.
So essentially, what's happening here is that I did think it was weird when they started calling the company Facebook and the product Facebook as well. So what we're changing here is not the name of the platform. The platform continues to be Facebook, but we're changing the company that oversees it all. The company that owns Oculus, Instagram,
Oculus
WhatsApp.
is gone now, though.
True, they're renaming Oculus as into something else. I forget what it is. And I watched the 11-minute cut down version of the whole announcement. I don't think I assume it went for like an hour and a half, just like every other tech event these days. And who's got the time for that? So we'll
Yeah.
include the 11-minute video link put together by the team at CNET. But I watched it and I thought it was kind of weird. It's not that surprising. Mark Zuckerberg, the Zuckmeister, was a bit of a robot. If you watch the video, not that weird. I think he's been called a robot for a little while, and it was sort of weird. He joked about, in this AR augmented reality sort of world, there was someone else who was choosing the avatar to be a robot, and he makes a joke about it, and it's all a bit sort of tongue in cheek. But I think what Facebook is trying to do is they want to become what I want to call the operating system for your social life. You or your like interactions. And when I say social life, I mean how you socialize with the world and with individuals. The name Meta, though, like Metaverse, I don't know. It's
It's a weird one. I don't really know what it means myself. I hear people using it as like a descriptive word for people that are a bit like edgy and all of that sort of stuff, but
yeah,
it doesn't
Meta,
really mean a
yes.
lot.
Yeah, well, the metaverse, I've just looked it up for a formal definition. The metaverse is a speculative future iteration of the internet made up of persistent shared 3D virtual spaces linked into a perceived virtual universe. So like a virtual existence.
Mm.
And so really what they're trying to do at Meta is trying to bridge that gap. So we talked about Oculus, which they bought, and now they've changed the name. Oculus does augmented reality goggles and sort of gaming. So that's how they're talking about like a hybrid life. So you might sit at your physical desk next to your physical like colleague who's there in person, but then they're talking about how the next desk over could be in augmented reality. You could interact with augmented reality objects that are on your desk or in you like within your space, and then look over, and there could be either a hologram or an avatar of a colleague sitting there because they're coming in from they're sort of being fed in from their own setup of whatever it may be. So it's all quite sort of weird.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's making me feel kind of unsettled thinking about that kind of scenario. It's making me think of like Wall-E kind of vibes of like where we're going to end up because everything's automated and you no longer have to get up and go and talk to a colleague, for example. I mean, we're doing this on a video call. I don't know if this is just like the very early iteration of where we're going to end up, but I don't know. I feel like there could be some issues that pop up with it.
For sure. I think there's definitely going to be issues, but I mean, see, I like what Facebook does. I think, Mark Zuckerberg deserves respect, but at the same time, he's a bit of a robot, and he's the head of a big corporation that does things that are more for profit than for the benefit of people. But he does talk about things like not having to commute to work anymore, which I think opens up the possibility of, say, living in the country, but like working in a way that feels like you're going into work, but doing that in a digital sense, so you don't have to physically be there. I think in the developing world, it probably raises the benefits of not necessarily needing to build out road infrastructure, but instead needing to focus on the communication side of things, the internet side of things. And don't get me wrong, I think all said and done, Facebook at one point was flying essentially blimps and drones around with Wi-Fi and enabling Wi-Fi I think it was in Africa. So ultimately, Facebook hit this problem where they were like, listen, not enough people have internet to keep using our services. So they literally decided to give people internet so they would sign up for Facebook and they'd make more money. So um,
Jeez.
that's what it's driven by at the end of the day. They're talking about stuff like subsidizing devices or selling them at cost to increase adoption. So this is a multi-billion-dollar organization just saying, you know what, we just want everyone to have it and we want to make it really cheap. Amazon has done that successfully with their tablets and the Amazon. Like, didn't you get a Amazon smart speaker
Yeah.
for
I
not
don't
too long?
shop too often on Amazon, but I signed up or I went to buy something. They said, hey, sign up for Amazon, 30-day free trial, free shipping. So I went, yeah, sure, why not? And then they sold me a $10 Amazon Alexa, which I was like, all right, may as well. And then canceled my subscription, which probably goes against what they're hoping I'd do. But I got an Alexa out of it, and now they can spy on me all the time.
Exactly. And it's part of your life, right? So they've sold you a $10 device, which they probably lost money on. But for sure, every time you look at it, you think Amazon.
Yep.
Every time we're mentioning it, like it's that classic,
Yeah.
we're talking about it now. So
They're
they're
getting all
doing.
my search information and all of my music requests and all of that sort of
Mhm.
stuff. What time I wake up in the morning,
Yep.
everything.
I mean, how much information can they just get by just being present, like always listening? Like you would
Yeah.
hope not always listening, but who
Yeah.
knows?
Yeah.
And if you didn't think it could get creepier, some of the stuff that Facebook were talking about was like getting better at tracking a person's face and emotions, and working better with face tracking when you have like masks on and or a beard. It's something that gets in the way, and developing technology so that avatars, so your virtual avatar, can make eye contact with the person you're talking to, which is, I think, yeah, I get it. I get it. Don't get me wrong. I think
Yeah.
that's what it's going to take to create experiences that are just so lifelike or real.
Yeah.
Like,
I
come
think
on.
there's concern there, though. I remember hearing a while ago, I want to say years ago, and I don't know where this came from, but basically with animators, a lot of the time when they're doing movies and TV shows, they actually need to like bring back how realistic the animations are, because then there becomes this disconnect between the audience and what they've created, where it's like almost lifelike, but people can tell that it's obviously not real. And then there's this discomfort. So they actually have to bring it back and make it more cartoony so that it's less like scary and all that sort of stuff. So imagine
Right.
talking to something in the virtual world that's so lifelike, but you as a human would still be able to tell like this is off, this isn't normal. And I feel like there would just be a lot of discomfort and I don't know,
At
disconnect.
the start, probably, but I guarantee you, Facebook is going to try and get to the point where they can track every single pore on someone's face and map how that would behave and react. It's getting into the realm of creepy. I do wonder, you have all these big like companies with insane amounts of money in the bank. Yeah, what they have the power to do, and what maybe governments should be doing to try and like intercept this. We've talked about in the past that governments are often reacting, rather than being proactive, because it's these private companies that push technology to the next level. But maybe this is one case where they need to sort of step in and not allow certain things. But um, yeah, talking about Facebook, or well, Meta, one of the other Meta companies, Instagram, has launched story links. So that's like the link sticker that
Mhm.
used to be a thing, I think, reserved for people with a certain amount of followers. I think it was.
Yeah, I think it was, I don't know if it was like a verified thing or businesses that had, yeah, particular amounts sort of to show that you're established enough. But just the regular old Joe or the regular small business with a couple of hundred followers couldn't do any of that. So it was classic link in my bio every single time. So I think this opens up a good opportunity for those smaller businesses to be able to, yeah, put in links into their stories. And if there's, I don't know, crowdfunding things or important information that's, user shared, so, campaigns that are shared across thousands of people's accounts, they can now all link to the website where it's meant to go. So I think that's really positive and a good step. It'll be interesting to see if that's something that will contribute to people staying on the platform or not. Because I know for me as an individual and as somebody who runs a business account, it's very frustrating that we can't put links into things. And it's just always trying to get people to go from story or post to profile to link to wherever it's going after that. It's not fun.
Yeah, it's a bit of a removed sort of, like, you're asking them for way too much, really, when someone's just scrolling through social media. I also wonder what this would do, because from memory, actually, yeah, Facebook's got, or Instagram in this case, has the native browser. So I wonder then how much of this stuff Facebook can track, um, and how much that would do for them in terms of analytics, and if they would even give us those analytics as additional power for like business accounts. Um, and I've heard interesting sort of thoughts about this, because some people say that it's going to lead to more spamming on stories, like spam links and just dodgy things. But and it's sort of taken away the exclusivity. I think there's a lot of things that technology has resulted in that sort of makes you go, okay, if you have, the cotton buds sticking out of your ears in terms of the AirPods, that's a certain status symbol. That's a certain thing that you can sort of hold over people, or flex on the gram. And feel like link stickers, that was one of those things, for better or worse, and now they've opened it up to for everyone. But I don't see, from an Instagram point of view, I don't necessarily, apart from the verified tick, I don't know why they would want to keep things locked down to certain people, because the more features they have, the more people can use those, and hopefully would improve their retention.
It's definitely one of those things I've never understood why they didn't let us do easy linking, why it was so restricted. But maybe they've started to listen, so that's exciting.
It might just be that they were testing it out for a little while, and now they've sort of enabled it to see, like, who knows how much they've refined from their back end, and what sort of data points they're picking up there as well.
Mhm.
Um, Dollarmites has finished. This a
Yes.
Commonwealth Bank initiative?
Yeah. So it's a bit of an interesting one. So Dollarmites actually started in, like, I think it was 1931 from the article I read. So it's been
What?
around for a significant amount of time. And it's a big ethical gray area, because it targets kids, school age kids, and it's a program that they sort of marketed as helping kids and parents understand the power of saving. So it was a case of, you'd bring in this little yellow booklet on a certain day each week, filled with a couple of like gold coins, handed off. It would be taken to the bank and deposited, and then you get your little yellow book back to put in your pocket money for the next whenever. I
Wow.
loved it. I was a Dollarmite, and I think most people around our age were Dollarmites as well. But finally, governments have cracked down and sort of said, this is not ethical. There's nothing that's showing people are learning to save from this. It's really just, I can't think of what the word is, but indoctrinating kids into the Commonwealth Bank. I mean, and I'm still with Commonwealth because I can't be bothered to move or go anywhere else. And they've just been, always there, probably because I was indoctrinated as a kid through the Dollarmites program and just never thought to change. So it's a bit of a concerning one. There's always questions when it comes up around like marketing to kids and what you can do, what you can't do, and I'm sure there's a lot of regulation around that. But Dollarmites from 1931 to 2021, it's done apparently.
90
So
years. I think it's
yeah,
more I think it's eye-opening that this could have run for that long.
yeah, it's pretty crazy. And I think from the article I read as well, that Commonwealth, like the valuation of the Dollarmites program to Commonwealth was in the range of $10 billion, which
Wow.
is, I mean, obviously we're talking banks, so they're dealing with massive numbers anyway, but $10 billion on one little school program where they deposit a couple of gold coins each person, $10 billion worth of sort of lifetime value that comes out of that. And that's insane.
Well, exactly. I mean, this is how much money do you think, like, they're going to have to now spend to make up the lost revenue there, or the lost indoctrination. That's probably a word.
Yeah.
I mean, and don't get me wrong, like, I've sort of contemplated how much we can reach out to universities, for example, because and whether, we go present at unis, or get students as interns, um not just for the helping students side of things, but just a simple, guess who's going to be a marketing director or a CEO in the future? It's the students. So, for us to get in there and sort of help them out, has that marketing benefit. Now, we've got to really work hard for it and talk to universities and get them in where the Commonwealth Bank could just, well, a lot of banks, by the sounds of it, used to have or used to do educational sort of branded content,
Mhm.
and they can't do that anymore.
No.
Apparently, their whole thing was that parents really valued Dollarmites, and that was their defense for sort of keeping it around. But
Yeah, they
I
tried to
would say
justify.
they'd have to. Like, there's no way that they're going to say no. It's like really good for us. It's
Yeah, they wouldn't go down
definitely
without a fight for sure.
exactly. But I mean, how many? In my opinion, our generation hasn't been that great at saving. So really, are they? I mean, did you learn a lot from saving through Dollarmites, do you think? Or do you think that
Uh, well, I think my contributions actually just came from mum and dad handing me a few dollars on the day of our little yellow book having to go in. Because I mean, I don't think we ever did like chores for money at home. It wasn't really that
like
case. It was more like, you're
allowances
living
and stuff
here,
like
you're going to contribute, you're not getting
that?
paid for it,
Yes.
but we'll pay for your meals, So
Yes.
I think, I don't know if I learned necessarily to save through that program. I learned to save other ways from my parents, but yeah, I can't say the Dollarmites had a significant uh, impact on my life besides being my lifelong bank because I couldn't be bothered to change.
Well, and there's as well, right? The friction to change banks is so, and the more they put up those walls, the more you want to stay in. Like, I started, and I've still got a Westpac account. I have a CommBank account, not because of Dollarmites, but just because I think I had to open one for like one of the student societies. But again, it's too annoying to close. I've still got some money in there. It's just gonna do its thing.
Yeah.
Same with Westpac. Like, it's too annoying to close, though. Because you got to go to the bank. Like, they could make it very easy. They could just let you go online and close the account. But of course, they're not going to
They're
do
not going
that.
to do that. They want your money.
It's not in their interest. Um, so I think it's fair to say that it doesn't really have a lot of value apart from the value that it presents to CommBank. I don't know. I think about time, if you ask me. Banks are under a lot of threat from crypto and all these smaller digital banks, etc., that are coming out. So this is just another one of those things that's putting pressure on them. But moving on to LinkedIn rolling out its freelance marketplace. I mean, and when we say LinkedIn, we really mean Microsoft because they're owned by Microsoft. As far as I know, this is the first move, and I'm trying to think. Surely it's the first move of like a freelance marketplace nature by any of the big players.
Yeah. It's an interesting move. I was thinking about it in the context of LinkedIn, obviously being a social network, and it's the only social network that really is work related. But I also feel like even though it's work related, it's very restricted to a particular type of work. And that tends to be sort of, I think, in the marketing space, anything that really requires networking, executive level sort of stuff,
But very
whatever
much
that looks like.
professional, like
Yeah.
professional services. Yeah.
So then bringing in this freelance platform to compete with Fiverr and Upwork, and I think Fiverr and Upwork, I'm not super familiar with them, but my understanding is that it's a lot of sort of graphic design, consulting,
Again, professional
copywriting.
services, but
Yeah.
but yeah, digitally deliverable professional services is
Yes.
what I would say.
Yeah. I just think that this will open up a new avenue of potential accounts or users, I suppose, into LinkedIn who are in that freelance space
Oh,
and
yes.
previously weren't super keen to go into LinkedIn and have that really manual networking kind of thing that they'd have to do, because this gives them a proper platform to build that network and build a reputation on LinkedIn where there are professionals that want these services. So I think it's a really interesting move. I think it's a really smart move. It'll be interesting to see how it does play out and whether it can compete with Fiverr and Upwork, who are obviously reasonably established in that space. Um,
Well,
But
they've
yeah, I mean,
apparently,
it's bringing the work to the audience.
yeah, apparently they ran a closed beta in the US that led to 2 million users. Now, that doesn't say, I assume that's 2 million people interacting on the platform, whether they're sellers or
I thought it
buyers.
was, yeah, an increase in 2 million users from the testing, was my understanding. I could be off on that.
Well, it's saying that this is a TechCrunch article saying that it's already picked up 2 million users from among the nearly 800 million users. So
Okay.
I think, yeah, it's just 2 million users were sort of interacting. But again, I I wonder what that number really means. Like, is that sort of, Kelsey going on from her LinkedIn to check out the marketplace, or is it you buying something? It's almost certainly doesn't represent the number of like sellers or service providers on there. That's way too big a number. But like I said, I think it's interesting that these they're the biggest like established company, Microsoft, to get into this space where they have a platform that delivers services like this. I mean, Facebook has Marketplace, but it's nowhere near the same. I feel like, see, with Fiverr and Upwork, they have a reputation for a certain quality of work, right? And Facebook Marketplace versus, say, something like Gumtree or eBay, they certainly have their reputations, but those reputations, we don't directly correlate with the brand or with the company itself, where when you do professional services like this, I think you start to correlate your brand with the quality of those services. So if you have inferior service providers, I think that could, quote unquote, cheapen the LinkedIn brand. But then again, maybe it's a good way for Microsoft to get into this space without putting the Microsoft name on the line, and it's just the LinkedIn name on the line.
Yeah. I don't know how LinkedIn has been performing, but it'll be interesting to see how this has an impact. Is, I mean, I have LinkedIn, but like, I don't think I ever actually go on there and scroll or do anything because it's just so full of those inspirational, I picked up $1 today and I gave it to a homeless person. It's
Yes.
just like, I
Okay,
can't
so
deal
it's
with
not just
those.
me.
Yeah,
That's
no.
all it is. Or like I grew up with a family of mice and didn't have food for 10 years, and
Yeah.
now I own a pest control company. No, that's sadistic,
Uh,
um but it's just that sort of stuff like that. I want to see work related things, not people patting themselves on the back, really. Like, oh, and I'm not doing this to, pat myself on the back, but just saying that if more people gave, ex prisoners a chance, that they too might find their next VP of sales. Like, it's just silly. So I think, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I wonder if it'll cheapen the brand. I wonder what sort of spaces they'll end up being. I think Fiverr and Upwork, have a certain reputation. Even talking about 99 Designs, certain reputation there. Especially if you're a professional within any of those spaces. So I guess we've got to wait and see. Jumping from one big player to another one, Google might not be the default Android search on Android devices for much longer. This is essentially being brought around by companies, sorry, not companies, countries, and in this case, Australia's ACCC, saying that it's just, you just need to, like Google, you need to provide options, because at the moment, you see your search bar, it's Google, that's all it is. You
mhm.
don't have an option to change it. It is the case on iPhone as well, but that's because Google pays Apple an insane amount of money to keep sort of being the default search engine.
Mhm.
To me, this is how ingrained it is. I didn't even think that we needed a different option. Like, I never looked at the
Yeah.
Google search bar and thought, I really wish I had Bing on here or Yahoo. I don't trust those
Yeah.
search results, but
I think it's a classic case of what we've discussed a few times in terms of governments trying to regulate and catching up with it. Because, as you said, it's gotten to a point where Google has such a monopoly on the search space that you don't really consider other ones. And there
well, it's the
are like a
verb, right?
minority. Yeah,
Like
exactly. You Google
Googling
it.
is the verb. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is minorities who are using other ones. I think DuckDuckGo is something you mentioned the other day. Some of these other weird ones that I've never even heard of. But I think it is important to have variety in there so that Google can't continue to be such a monopoly. Obviously, they have a good product and everyone does all of their SEO and all of that sort of stuff for Google. But I think that it's important for that to be regulated so that they can't continue taking up every little bit of internet space and life space without us realizing before we're completely controlled by Google.
The thing with Google though is that they've kept innovating, because I think in a lot of spaces competition leads to more innovation, but for whatever reason Google's just continued to innovate in the search engine space despite not really having a competitor. Like, let's be honest.
Well, it's
Like,
probably preemptive in that case then, because if they stopped innovating, something else would come up and people would be like, oh, Google's rubbish, they've stopped doing X and Y. There's this new person on the blog, let's try them out. But if Google continues to innovate, then they are keeping every competitor at bay, because people will just look at it and go, I don't want to compete with Google. I can't compete with Google. I don't want to try.
or, and this is a good segue into the next topic. Was it because of the financial gain that they had to make by making all these different changes to the search engine, and how things are displayed? We've talked about a few different search features, and potentially could be money related, because you mentioned, well, you pronounced it as AMP, which I don't blame you, Kelsey. You're not a developer, you're not in the space, but
Is it not AMP?
it's AMP, because
Oh.
AMP I think is a big financial
Okay, so
institution.
that's who I thought this was
Um,
about. So I was like, oh yeah, AMP, I'm somewhat familiar.
no.
Okay.
This is AMP, or AMP is. Let me look up the um, AMP websites. I think they're called Accelerated Mobile Pages. There you go. It was originally created by Google, and essentially what they do is they strip back a lot of the content. You've probably noticed it once in a while, Kelsey, when you click through the search result on your phone, it pops up in like a very bare bones display. Like, there's no ads floating around, there's no real background color. It's sort of just text and that's it. Um, Google pushed it for a long time, and I think WordPress encouraged it as well, or Automatic encouraged it as well. But what's come out is that it's actually led to less revenue being pushed through to website owners and publishers, which is not a good thing, which is obviously not something that someone like Google would want anyone finding out about. It's come out as part of some unredacted antitrust complaints from Google, and this is just directly from Google internal documents. So it's something worth mentioning for developers out there. I was never a fan of AMP. I think you just build a website so well that you don't need this artificial, like, just extract text, get rid of everything else sort of setup to make your website's mobile experience good enough. I just think that that was just too far. But yeah, it looks like there were financial reasons, because Google had to pay people less. Really, ultimately, that's what it was. Or at least Google gets to make more money than everyone else involved in that piece. So really had to mention that. Keeping the topic on money, TikTok is testing a tipping function, which allows you to tip creators, which I don't know. I think
It's
Twitch lets you do that. YouTube
Yeah, I was
lets you
going
do
to
that.
say, I think Twitch is the other platform that does that kind of model. And as an Australian, I find it very weird. The thought of like watching and consuming digital content and then being like, yeah, this is great. Here's $5. It's a really odd concept to me, probably less weird to like Americans and other countries that have tipping culture. Just, I don't know. It doesn't sit well with me.
Just pay people properly the first time, and you don't
Yeah.
have to
Mm,
support them further by sort of making your own decision around, how much you want to tip someone.
yeah, exactly.
But it does sort of increase, and I'm sure we've mentioned this previously, that TikTok's going to want to monetize and see how they can monetize moving forward. And this to me is just a way of saying, you know what, if you want to, give some money to someone, do so. I do wonder how much they will keep though. Users must be 18 years older to send tips to creators. Um, Oh, and you don't even have to be following the account to tip them, so you can just tip whoever you like. It is a limited sort of release, and it looks like accounts must be in good standing on the platform and have at least 100,000 followers, meet an age requirement, and agree to TikTok's tips terms. It's a lot of T's, but I wonder. I just can't see. They don't seem. Oh, any money tipped to creators will go directly to that individual
Okay.
for now.
Yeah.
That's what I want to say.
That's an interesting one. I really thought TikTok would take more of a share, but oh well.
Maybe do they get to hang on to your financial information, and then when they add, paid stickers and things like that, they've got a user who's already entered their info, and it makes it very easy to buy. I know that's certainly like a thing for me when my card details are already there. It's very easy to just go, yep, do it.
Yeah, very true.
Maybe that's what it is.
Mm.
Weird, but moving on to Apple, someone who's used to taking a lot of money, taking a big cut from everyone. I'm just going on with my segues today. I don't know how you feel about it, Kelsey, but if you're a listener, leave a comment. Tell me what you think about my segues. Are they good, or are they sort of dad level jokes?
Mm.
But Apple seems to have forgotten that it built a notch in the MacBook Pro.
Yeah. This is something we
Who
touched on
could this
last
one
week,
up?
actually. We had that conversation where we were sort of saying, how will the notch interact with things? Turns out, not well. Sometimes you have,
Notch well.
God, that one's a bad one. So people have been reporting on various programs that pop up. So a probably good example is maybe some of the Adobe suite that will have lots and lots of tabs across the top. And all of those tab options just continue until they get hidden by the notch. And you can't click on it and you can't do anything. It's just a menu item that's disappeared behind the notch. And I just thought that's ridiculous. I don't know how you introduce something like a notch and don't come up with fail safes and foolproof ways to make sure if you've got a menu bar, maybe it will like do a second level, or it will split the menu bar. I don't know how, but just something else than what
Or just
nothing.
do something about it.
Yeah,
Anything.
it just seems insane to me. How do you overlook something like that? Because it was one of the first questions you'd asked, actually. That was like one of the first things you thought about when it came to this notch. So I don't know how during all their planning and everything, they didn't go, what happens if there's more than 5 menu options?
Well, there's a video of a user. Like, to be honest, I've been trying to even find how the cursor or mouse interacts with the notch. I just haven't seen anyone do it. If the new MacBooks were more affordable, I would have just said, let's just buy one and check it out. But I just can't get myself to that level. But there are. Oh, this is Snazzy Labs. Who's a big YouTuber. Um, Hold on. So what's he saying? Oh gosh, there's just stuff behind the menu bar and he can't see it, and he's hovering over it. Look at that.
Yeah,
That's ridiculous.
that's just a massive oversight from Apple. Oh, so the mouse jumps.
Oh, there you go.
That's annoying.
Wow.
And then disappears. Okay. Yeah.
Wow. Hold on. What? Oh, that's a DaVinci Resolve. And the thing here is, wow. So the thing, I mean, really, we'll have links to the original article by The Verge. So if you're listening to this, you should go use the links to really get that information. But these are not small like players. These aren't like random,
Mhm.
small like developers who are building software. We're talking about
No.
DaVinci Resolve and the Adobe Creative Suite,
Yeah,
and
it's
the
not a
MacBook
niche
Pro.
case, that's for sure.
No, well, I mean, it's a niche device, but this software is used exactly by those for
Yeah,
the device. It is nowhere near a niche case. You would think that it's everyone who uses that device.
yeah,
I just,
it's
I
it's
just don't
mind blowing.
understand. Like, how? And I mean, knowing Apple, I think they'll blame. Well, in the past, they've blamed users. They've said, well, I think when was it Antenna Gate, when y- people found out that holding one of the iPhones a certain way ruined its I think it was internet connectivity, or the phone signal dropped. So at
God,
that point, yeah, I mean, Apple then blamed the user for holding the phone the wrong way.
how dare you
Um,
hold a phone that's meant to be mobile
held
and
up in that
movable?
way.
My
Exactly.
God.
Um, and like we mentioned last week, they're the same people who put in a charging port on the underside of a rechargeable mouse. So this is somewhat expected but really weird for a company known for their design prowess, or
Yeah.
at least the effort they put into design. Um, yeah, it's a weird one, but the last topic for this week's episode is that Mailchimp and Shopify team up in an e-commerce boost. Tell me more about this one.
Yeah, so I mean, it sort of says it in the title. Mailchimp and Shopify have partnered, so they're basically doing a direct integration between the two platforms. Mailchimp traditionally as the newsletter, email kind of software, but they're, as I think we've discussed in previous episodes, branching out into sort of adjacent service offerings. So I think I just wanted to mention this one because it was interesting to me for these two to pair up, because of course you've got a lot of probably e-commerce platforms that would be using Mailchimp to send out their newsletters for, sales and all of that sort of stuff. So having that direct integration with Shopify just removes all sorts of barriers to purchasing. And I think that's really exciting. The other thing that the article sort of mentioned was around the analytics that people will be able to access. So it'll basically combine your analytics and Mailchimp and Shopify, which I imagine will give you incredible customer insights about who's clicking on things, where they're going, whether they're buying from your emails or not, because I think that can be difficult to track sometimes, and all sorts of other stuff. So it'll just be interesting to see how these two interact going forward, and how, what that will mean for some of these smaller businesses who use platforms such as Shopify and Mailchimp.
Yeah, this is also interesting given what we talked about at the start with Vistaprint acquiring another company. I mean, this is all the benefits of an acquisition, um, without a company having to acquire the other. Though I wouldn't be surprised if either one of these companies comes out and says we just acquired this other company
Mm-hmm.
at some point. I'm trying to remember though. Was Mailchimp bought recently? What
I don't know
was
if it
it?
was bought. I think we discussed its valuation. It had some crazy valuation, maybe.
Ah, yes, yes.
Don't remember what it is off the top of my head, though.
Oh, yes. It was bought by Intuit. Sorry. So
Ah,
it was
yeah,
bought by Intuit for $12 billion. So um, I wouldn't be surprised if Intuit reaches out to Shopify to buy Shopify as well, in
yeah,
time. But these sorts of integrations would have been in the works for a long, long time. But like you said, Kelsey, I think it sort of puts more power in the hands of the consumer. In this case, small business owners, which is never ever a bad thing. Um, so I think my big takeaway from this episode is that there's a lot happening to make it very easy for small business owners to do a lot of design and websites and production themselves. Um, and the scary takeaway is just what Facebook's doing with the change of name.
yeah, absolutely. I just feel sad about Dollarmites, to be honest. I get it, and I agree with it closing, but there's a little part of me that has a very strong connection to it and the memories I have around it, which
Yeah,
is the whole
it kind
point.
of feels like, you know, Vegemite stopping production, or
Yeah,
something of that scale almost, isn't it? For
yeah,
any Australian. Saying that, Dollarmites doesn't have probably the international recognition that
no,
something like Vegemite has, but in Australia, I would say Dollarmites is. I mean, if Vegemite, Dollarmite, they sort of even go hand in hand.
Very true.
On that note, thank you for joining us on this episode of the podcast. As always, we've got links to everything that we've talked about in the description, including some bonus links for things like the 11-minute video that CNET put together about Facebook's Meta announcement, along with all the other things that we talked about, and multiple links where it makes sense to give you different perspectives. As a reminder as well, don't forget to join the Facebook group. Link for that in the description too, where we talk about these sorts of things and try our best to bring you as much value as possible. So thanks for listening to this episode. Catch you on the next one.
Yeah, catch you all next week.